All right. So thanks everybody for coming. My name is Phil Bossman. This is going to be talking about how to tame the event log beast, if you want to call it that. So the idea of, somebody just before us, Mike talked about, using the event logs to do some other stuff and then passing it on to some other orchestrations. So this is kind of in that same vein, but this is just a different spin on that kind of thing. Wow, we're moving. Certainly want to thank our sponsors, of course. I like a bunch of these products. They're good people. Pure Storage, Patch My PC, Chocolatey, Manning. I bought a book from the Manning, so that was good. So, because you could always use another PowerShell book. So, who I am? My name is Phil Bossman. I am PowerShell enthusiast. I've been doing it since the Monad days. My world is EUC, and for those who don't know, EUC is end user computing, meaning Citrix, VMware, a bunch of that stuff, VDI. Desktop OS, that kind of stuff. That's my world. That's the world I live in. So I work in operations side, and now we're moving into cloud and Azure, and I'm a part-time hiker. And Research Triangle PowerShell user group. So shameless plug. Certainly join us twice a month, first and third Wednesday of the month. So what are we going to talk about? The agenda of this talk is, last year I gave a talk on using get-when-event, basically using PowerShell to manage the event logs and kind of do a bunch of things with the event logs. We're going to quickly talk about that, but then we're going to expand upon that and actually talk about XML, because XML is running it's underneath the covers. So the event log is just driven by event. It's a data-driven XML format, okay? We're going to talk about WEF and WEC, Windows Event Log Forwarding, Windows Event Log Collectors. Then we're going to talk about event triggers, and then what you can do with it. And it's something that's I don't see very much documentation on, so we're just going to talk about that as well. So, quick primer. I'm going to go really through this slide really quickly. You see online a bunch of stuff. Hey, get my when events from system logs and just give me the first 5, right? That kind of thing. So very quickly, there's also multiple ways in which to query the event logs. I can do it just by a straight up name. I can say, give me a hash table. So hey, we're in PowerShell. We understand what hash tables are. So we can give it name value pairs and say, hey, give me the log name as my system. Again, I want anything with ID number 1, but hey, we can still do, give me the first 5. So you see a lot of these examples around. You may also see in some documentation XPath. Some people like it, some people don't like it, but I'm really kind of pointing out some of the things that you'll typically see online and other places which you can be. And let's go event logs. Here we are. So what is XPath and a bunch of stuff? So when we're playing with event logs, everybody's pretty familiar with the GUI version of the event viewer. Right here we're in this form. So we can, hey, click the things we're looking for. We want 4624 events, and then go find those events and it filters from there. All right, so we're pretty familiar with that. But not everybody understands that, hey, there's this other thing here called XML. And right in here, this is the XPath. All right, so XPath is a XML type searcher. So you can search XML documents using XPath. So full stop there. That's where it comes from. So if you're looking for how to build this kind of thing, and you're quickly back. It's telling, hey, I want error window warnings, and that's the levels. And then it's this whole thing created, system time, that's all based upon the number of ticks around. So next part is XML is your friend. And I point this out, XML is definitely your friend because everything rides underneath it. And so if you understand, as we just saw before, is I can come in here and manually edit this XML and say, I want level 3 instead of 2. And I'm going to get that as well. Actually, we said that's event ID. We're going to remove this event ID from here. Did I just screw up the key here? There, now it should finish. And it's invalid because I messed it up. But it doesn't really matter because I don't really care. We're going to come back to the filter, uncheck yes, and then let it build me from here, right? So now I can go back here, it builds my XML for me. Point is, it's XML at that point, right? There's a bunch of XML, we're passing it in, this is the event log viewer is doing that work. You can do XML from here. And so you can clearly see, hey, there's an XML list, and then each entry for the XML query saying, hey, the path I'm looking for, actually the event log folder on the left is called a path. And then, hey, we're going to select from this path, star, and then close the select. So it's pretty straightforward on what you can do. You can take that entire, the reason I'm kind of pointing this out and putting in a separate variable is that I don't feel like a lot of people understand it's just a random piece of text. And you can see here, I'm putting, there's a at symbol, put the quote, at symbol, just a here string. You can make it whatever you want, meaning the whole point is it can be dynamic. I can throw variables in here. I can dynamically create it. I can write whatever kind of code. I'm just generating this block of XML. I don't really care what it is, right? I guess I do care what it is, but I care enough that I can do a bunch of stuff with it, right? And so in this particular fashion, I actually parameterize the event path itself and the event ID. So I can loop this multiple times. I can pass in a variable. I can create this into a function and have it go get me the pieces I'm looking for. So you can do all that stuff. Point that out because we're going to use it later. We're going to use this concept of it being XML, right? And so you can just saw, we understand this is PowerShell. We work things at scale, meaning that if I do it to one computer, I should be able to do 10 computers. I should be able to do it to 10,000 computers, right? And now we can play this game of filtering left and how often we should be doing things. In the first case, we're going to say, hey, go get the win event from all of those computers in AD. All right, that can, but then we have this problem of, hey, which computers are on, which ones are talking, which ones are not talking. We have that problem. And the second example here is you can do the reverse and say, I have my list, just run a win event multiple times. So it's whether you're filtering left, filtering right, you run the command once, you run it back the other way. So it's a different variation on how some things go. Where did they go? Oh, extra slide. So we talked quickly at scale, this idea of potentially I can do all this work to a bunch of machines, but then the question is, well, what happens to a machine that's out there and it just happens to be off? Or somebody messed it up, or it's just in the middle of a reboot. That's typically a problem, and now you're going to sit there waiting, try to get these events going here. So that's where comes this concept of event collectors. And we'll see Microsoft has this process for forwarding events away from where the machine is. And so there's a collector that collects them, and then there's a forwarder at this point. So we're going to quickly just jump onto that one. Oh, didn't full screen. So how do we turn on a collector? Okay, so let me take a step back and tell the story in this fashion. So again, I work in the EUC space. So be it virtual desktops and multiple Citrix servers that as far as I'm concerned, are all ephemeral, right? I can turn them on, turn them off. They can scale up, scale down, and I don't really care. But I also want them to be that purpose. So I don't have to add this to a collection, add this to other components to keep things running in that form. So I want to take my event logs, right, and forward them on to somebody else and let the event log collector hold on to everything. And so then as these machines are rebooting, as these machines are, not even rebooting, but being deleted and added. So, hey, we have to scale up for a period, and then we're going to scale down. I don't want to have to be trying to actively, talk to 40 machines when there's actually only 2 of them now because we're not on that project. And so I don't have to manage that as well. So what happens in order to get this process to work out? This is the form that typically everybody sees. They come in here, use this to enable Windows event collectors. You simply come into a subscription. That is what we're going to see in just a second as to what that really means. So event collector, you define any machine. Any machine can be a collector. And actually, it's not going to give you this warning message, but actually on the slideshow before, you saw the little warning, hey, you just got to turn on the service. It's not on by default because what are you going to be collecting? Nobody's sitting there waiting for you to collect, right? So now in a collection, so we'll actually create a quick subscription. The collector is actually defining subscriptions that, we'll talk about here quickly. Subscriptions. So what is a subscription? Sample 2. We're going to actually do this quickly live. So we're going to define your subscription, define whatever you want. Where do the events go? So typically, we want to put them into forwarded events. There is a couple modules that will give you other paths. And actually, Michael talked about creating those separate event logs the actual paths themselves, the channels, as we call it. There is an option for event collectors to actually have the collector reach out to the machines and go get them. Holy mackerel, this is loud. Reach out to the machines, go get them. But the best practice is to actually have the machines forward to me. And so it's a source initiated versus a collector initiated. And what that means is that you can define a set of computers, and we're just going to say, servers. Actually, I don't think I moved servers here. I'm going to say, just domain computers, just to give me a group. So all domain computers, they're going to, if they talk to this subscription, it's going to say, hey, you're in my list. I want you to subscribe to some stuff. Or I subscribe to a bunch of stuff. So what are you going to subscribe to? What events are being subscribed to? Well, this looks real familiar, right? We just saw this. This is the exact same format we're looking for. So you could come through here and do the GUI interface and says, hey, give me the critical error and warning events for whatever that machine. So if the machine, and then we need to say what? Yeah, we'll just say this. Uncheck. We'll just say the application logs. So we only want application, critical error and warnings. That's what we want, right? And if the machine happens to check in and it's conformed to this structure, it's going to say, give me these events. But ultimately, look, we got XML. We can actually talk to it. We can actually talk to it. We couldn't tell it to do different things. Then there is a setting as far as how often you don't want to saturate the entire environment. So you can say optimize for bandwidth, meaning that it's only going to send so many events at one point in time. So it's not going to just say, hey, give me everything. It'll poll it. You can also optimize for latency, means as soon as the event comes, keep on sending. I want to see it as soon as possible. Or you can say, I don't want to cross the network for all that data bandwidth. Think the normal is like every hour, so it won't happen immediately. So we'll go from there, and we'll go from there. So this is a collector. So how do you, now that the collector is ready and waiting to do, how do you then get the machines to actually talk to it? So we'll go into group policy, and I just happen to create this group policy called WEC. I'm going to open them all up, and we're going to close this one. This is really all you need to do to turn it on. So there is in Windows Components, event forwarding. Man, my mouse moves. You can set up your target subscriber manager and follow the documentation. I don't need to work through this process of following the documentation. But what do you need to do? Define HTTP, define the collector itself, how often it refreshes, and the subscriber manager. This is just in the documentation. And then the maximum number of events. This is just kind of best practice. Also in best practice is the network service is the actual one doing all the work. So you need to give it access to the event log readers group on the machine. That is actually not a requirement, but in order to read the security log, you need that. So if you're going to be collecting security events, you need to add this component. So it's one of those things that's not highly documented, but it will be something you need to know. So it's all running as a network service, and it's the one doing all the work. So if you needed to collect those logs, it's just permissions at that point. So once you turn that on, once you do that, machines will come along, and they will start sending events. And I broke this earlier because I mistyped a word, and it stopped sending events. So we'll work from that. We'll see what we can do from there. We're going to come back to my presentation. And so we talked about the collector, and we have a couple samples of what we do with the collectors and event forwarding. So with that point so now I'm going to get a list of all the events from all the different machines on my machine, and they're all going to be collected in one space, right? And so, hey, that's a benefit. And so as I turn off machines, they're just going to come in and send those events. And as they turn off, they'll just stop sending events. The only caveat at that point is potentially this idea of you may have to do some scavenging on your event collectors. If you are using Windows event collectors, just as machines get dropped off, they get fallen away. You just don't want to, if you get too many, the machine will slow down. The collector will slow down just because it's trying to collect from devices that don't exist. The next thing I want to say, and in this form, is that the community is awesome. So mechanically, just setting up Windows event collectors, it's not a problem. But now, what the heck do you collect on? What are you working with? And this is where just reach out to the community. And so there's a module for Windows event forwarding. And so our friend Fred, who is here, started this, and now Andy manages this repository. It's still pretty old, but it does exactly what I'm looking for. And the reason I'm pointing this out is this is a PowerShell conference. This is not the screen. Get command. There's event forwarding. This is PowerShell. This is a PowerShell conference. So hey, I did all that from the GUI. Well, I can do the same thing from here. We're going to say get web subscriptions. So this is the whole point. We can now interface with that module. I can build the new subscriptions. I can do it all directly from here. So, and now that I have objects, I'm going to say the name is desktop. Come on. All right. But like PowerShell at all, as what it is, there's a default view and there's extra view. So we can see what's the style, who has access to do this, and we see this thing here. Here's this XML that we kind of played with before, right? And I keep coming back to this thing. What's this XML? What's this XML talking about? Is that in this fashion, I think it's not really easy to see at this point, but it just says from the application system and security event, give me all the errors, warnings, and informationals. So that's what this is actually saying in the XML. Again, I point out, why do I want to care about all this stuff? Come on. To my other slide, the other guy, and I point out this. So first one is managing the event logs. But then I got this other guy over here, similarly Windows event logs as well, but it's by Palantir. Anybody know who Palantir is? What do? They're a security firm. They're the ones doing crazy stuff, but it's all security. Now I point that out because, hey, I'm an operations guy. I don't really understand what I should be collecting, right? I come in, I go, well, maybe I want to know that somebody's logged into the computer, somebody's not logged into the computer. But if I can follow some of what they're doing as well, they're the ones coming down and saying, hey, these are the events that I typically bring into a SIM operation and all that. Well, I can use the lessons that they've learned and inject it into my stuff. And so if I was looking for, ADFS stuff or auto runs or other things, what's happening on the machines, I can now use the queries that are defined somewhere else to gather more information from me. And so I think part of the lesson I'm trying to impart at this point is that use the community itself to get the pieces you're looking for. So you have all the tools. Now it's use some of the community to put those tools back together for you. Especially because I'm going to talk about just another second. I point this out because when I was at one point many years ago, I was trying to figure out what to do with here, but where's my code? Is that in doing that, one of the things that the security people do quite often is that let's look at this XML. This looks kind of like what we just talked about. I have my query 0, security event log. Line number 5 says, hey, give me all the security events. But I had to go to the security, those guys to figure out, hey, there's this thing called suppress. So now I can take that XML, stick it into, I can take this XML or this kind of structure, and I can say, send me everything. I can tell my clients, forward me all your events, but suppress these. So the stuff that I know, the services, contacts, you can even scroll down further. Hey, I want all the logon events types. I want anybody interactive login, but I don't need that one. Why are you going to send that one to me? That's the system itself. It's doing it all the time. And so I can't show live, but we have SolarWinds monitoring our environment. Every 2 minutes, it's checking the machine, checking the machine. So it's just filling the event log continuously. Like, I don't need any of that. I don't need any of that real data. It can do its own thing, but I want to suppress the monitoring tool from showing the monitor. It's painful. like all of the events. And some other, like I have some other WMI events locally, like SymBIOS, it just keeps generating stuff completely. I don't need any of that stuff into my collector. So I kind of point that out. The reason I point that out is that, hey, some people say, why are you going through all this effort for Windows Event Forwarding and sending it to a collector? Well, I have Splunk, and I have all these other, Event Tracker, other kind of products that collect all my stuff. Well, I don't need an agent on any of this stuff. And Splunk and all that charges you by ingress. So if I'm not sending, I'm suppressing all the stuff that I definitely know I don't need. I'm reducing my ingress fee into Splunk, right? And if I can manage this effectively, I can say the Windows Event Forwarders, send it to my collector, and I put one Splunk agent on the collector, and there you go. And so now I have potentially, depending upon how your environment is, maybe 3 collectors, all collecting logs, do some processing, and then pass it on, right? So Splunk only exists, the Splunk agent is there, along with my Event Tracker, that's what we use internally, but then I only can put it in one place. So I can suppress the stuff that I definitely know is not in use, and I don't need, and I can eliminate that process. Quickly I point that out because the lesson is that the security groups do this quite often, and I had to go into their world in order to get that information. So community is awesome. Feel free to reach out to other communities, and it is valuable to really see, even what the DBAs are doing as far as optimization and processing multiple tasks at the same time. It's always a good thing. So WME operation, hey, events, the standard events that are just garbage, you don't need them. Let me come back to, let's go. All right, the demo won't complete, but we're gonna talk about it because I just broke it. Truth be told. So the reason I say that just won't work. So kind of in this example, I'm gonna move away quickly, is that we just saw what this before is, it's just a big here string, right? So I can define, that suppression and that selection in here and just run it right there from PowerShell itself. So this is valid code, right? This will run. Actually, I think it'll run. And there they all go. All right, so here's all the logins that are not just like system. On this particular system, we don't really care about that, right? And so you can use some of those lessons. You can do it locally. And if this is the XML that I want to run on a local machine and I don't want to suppress, all right, well, then I can just transfer it into I can then take this whole XML. I got to copy and paste it. But this code, go back to this guy. Tell me he's collecting. Nope, he's still not collecting. He broke it. Right? Come back here, process, change the event, come here to XML, and paste, and it will work. Done. So that is one thing. I think this other one, this is my baseline. So this is the other example. This is really that exact code, right? Just in this form. And for brevity. So, and I'm still not collecting events, but that's not going to work because I broke it, of course. All right, so coming on to the last part. Okay, so here we are. We're now collecting events into a single place. What the hell does that mean? Like, why am I not going to do anything with it? Like, why is that valuable? Well, there is a new thing. Not a new thing, but if you weren't aware, is that there is something called an event log trigger. Now, in the world of scheduled tasks. So Windows itself has a potential trigger that, hey, if an event is created and it matches a part, you can actually trigger actions. Well, trigger what? I can trigger anything. I can actually call some random exe, but I can just as well call PowerShell itself, right? And so the reason I point this out is I used to work for a hospital system, and this is now a quick little story. Used to work for a hospital system, and we had people logging in, and they kept locking out their accounts, right? And we're spread out so far enough is that, if you weren't aware too, is lockout events are actually a replicated event. So if the 4740 will replicate to the PDC, and that's where it all happens. So they all get replicated, but not the invalid login event. So that doesn't get replicated to a single place. And so, hey, the PDC knows that there's an event happened, and there wasn't a 440 on the DC it happened on, but how do you know which computer actually failed the login? So I know it got locked, but I don't know where. So long story short, I had to figure out how to query all the DCs and figure out what computer that guy failed his login, so then it created a lockout. So created a Windows event collector, sent all my AD logs to a single machine. Basically, we called it AD Health. So send everything to AD Health. He was collecting all the events. I then came in here and used an event log trigger. So when a lockout happens, it goes back and finds the last login, the last failed login for failed event for that user, and then sends an email off to the service desk. So then the service desk sits there, and they get a shared mailbox, and it's just there collecting these emails from the system. And all it says is that Bill Smith locked that computer. Okay. And so when Bill calls, hey, that's the computer that you locked on. Or the reverse, what's actually happened more often than not, is that they'd sit there and watch, there's Bill, or Mary, and Mary, and Mary, and Mary. And then somebody just calls, hey, Mary, you got to go turn off that computer over there, right? So that was typically the scenario. So that is one scenario. What we do now, or I haven't implemented yet. All right, so long story short, you can use the Windows Event Scheduler, Task Scheduler, to actually call events. Those events can be triggered by events. And to Mike's point is that you can generate those events yourself, or in this case, we can just watch the event logs themselves, right? But what does it take to actually create an event? An event itself, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom quickly, and what it looks like is to actually register a scheduled task itself. When you create a scheduled task of any kind, it needs to do a bunch of things. You've got to give it a name, of course, path on where it's going to be, the description on what it is, then what work you're going to do, what's the trigger, how are you going to generate this? Is it going to be triggered on a scheduled task, on a time? Is it going to be on an event? Other things. What's it going to do? And then actually the principle that it's going to run as. So you need to define all these, and at the top, we're going to define what they are. So what's the action we're going to do? We're actually going to call PowerShell with a bunch of variables. We're going to say, hey, we're going to call PowerShell. We are going to run this script called alertDA, and we'll see what that is in a minute. But there is an ability to actually get the event itself. And so you have the ability to create some other variables so that I want the actual event ID itself, the record ID. So as the events are creating, the machine has a record ID. What computer generated it? I'm going to use user, source address, and that kind of thing. So I created some code, and I can pass in variables. It doesn't really matter. We need to define what the principal is that we're going to run the job as. We then create any of the settings that are possible. Typically in this fashion, we can say, hey, don't allow to run on demand. So then this is you shouldn't, well, in this case, what we'll see what we're going to do is that you can set a whole bunch of stuff. Read the documentation. You can do a whole bunch of stuff, whether it runs hidden, whether it does not, whether it can be run while it's existing, allow to start, other bunch of stuff. The trick we saw here, hey, there's this thing called XML. And so in this fashion, what we were doing is looking for the login event of any user. So long as what it is, I want the login event, right? In the terminal service, I want to see in this fashion, this query itself to say, tell me everywhere that the domain admin logged in, right? So if you happen to have a domain admin account, I want you to know that you shouldn't be logging into Windows servers or only the DC. So if you log into any particular server other than the DC, I want to know about it, right? And so that's what this is effectively going to do. We'll kind of get to it. So the point is that, hey, we're going to say interactive logins. That's the event we're going to look for. But the magic, too, is that we can take some details out of the event. Actually, I'm not sure if I actually gave a quick example. Now I'm going to deviate. And, of course, that's always dangerous. Yeah, because it's going to do code. Get an event. How am I doing with time? I think I'm okay. Yep. I'm going to say like the floor. I'm going to say out variable events. All right, so now we have a thing called events. Look at me, I already did this before. All right, so give me the first event, or second event, actually. So we kind of say this before. I didn't actually do some demos of this. We're gonna kind of live dangerously here. So this is just what this event happens to be. I don't even know what it is, so we don't really care. But the point being is that the reason I'm looking at this stuff is that, where did I go? Is I want to get these pieces out of the event itself, right? So there's the structure for event, system, record, and all these other components. Well, where the heck did that come from? So we look at the event itself. Typically see it comes into this form when you are in PowerShell as full, or you can say format list and give me all the properties. So it's going to give you the message itself, the ID, all the other components. And so you will also see typically, or not typically, but you will see in code that people produce is that this thing called properties, give me properties number 2, whatever that happens to be, right? And go from there. So we can do it out here. Yeah, let's do it out here. Okay. An event. I'm just going to do it here. System. Jeez. My tab complete's killing me. Max form. Behavior. Sorry. Events. Has any properties? Something more I can do. Yeah, so we just get some BS data, right? And so the reason I say that is that you'll typically see in this form, right? Whether it's running or it's doing some other, it's actually looking at a service at this point, whether the service is running. So we can quickly look too. So this just happens to be service controls running. We get some portable data information, but there's some extra data in here. Kind of talked, and if you were at my last talk last year, you saw me do a bunch of this other stuff, and that's kind of what we want to do, and I want to talk to it. I'm deviating, but that's okay. I think I have time. So we're going to call it XML, and there is a method on the event log object called, yeah, even MML. That all works. Thanks, Mike. To XML. So we can send it to a string, but we can send it to an XML. Well, like, why the heck did I just spend 3 minutes trying to work through all that kind of stuff? Because now I have this thing called an object, an XML. So I now converted this thing, events1, into an XML object. But now, with this XML object, I can now say, well, get me, you saw, hey, it itself is an event. I want the event property. What hey, event property has system. System. This kind of looks familiar. It's all the properties of, it is an internal XML itself. It is raw XML. There's an inner XML and external XML. But the event data is that now I have all the properties I'm looking for. So I went through all that magic, all that fun stuff, so that I can figure out, hey, there is a computer property inside that event. There's inside system, so it's inside this path, the event, the system, the computer property. Went through all this process just so I can create a variable, right? And it then put it into a named value inside of this trigger called value queries. So if I can query the event itself and stick it into a property called name of queries, I can then use it inside of the event trigger. So this is the part of the magic that you can use to actually inject. So quite often you see is that, hey, just trigger, fall off triggers. But now to actually get information inside the event itself, you need to jump through this hoop. So, or I need to jump through this hoop, and then we'll see in a second that, it's all crazy. Again, my demo is not going to work, but this could work. Probably could work. Yep. So if I run this, it will, actually I already did it because I was trying to break it and then broke it again. So we're going to delete. So this is the exact same thing we just saw, right? I'm going to run this thing called alert DA on system. I get all the values. And actually, let's just run it again. So I ran the whole thing and I created this new task called alert DA. Domain admins. So all the properties we're looking for on this event, and it's a custom trigger, right? So you don't get all the properties. But actually, let's use get scheduled tasks. Task name, alert DA, format list. Again, format list is your friend. But we just saw a bunch of stuff from here. And you know what? Let's actually do a variable, call it task. So now we have a task that we can play with. And it's going to return to you an array of tasks because that's just what it does. So now I have the triggers. You can see this looks familiar. Just what we're looking for, the pattern, and then the actual values themselves, the value properties, value queries. Meaning that you can do this and you can do all of this in PowerShell. Sometimes it's really quicker just to do it the other way. But now we have our task. And actually see if the collectors are actually working now. Nope. My source computers aren't connecting. I don't know why they're not connecting, but they're connecting. So if it would have connected, I could log into another server as my domain admin, which happens to be, who am I? Mr. James. So he's our domain admin for today. And it works from that point. So the short of it, and kind of I'm getting short on time, lessons to learn is that XML is your friend, is that you can create your own components when you're working with the Windows event logs. Everything is a query. Use other resources in order to get you the components you're looking for, whether it be subscribe to the events or even suppress the events you don't want. And knowing that, well, just because you can do some events you're looking for, you can actually call scripts and actually run them against it. And so it has been used, and we use it quite often for other things to kick those things off. Mike told before, as far as the idea that he can synthetically, as the word he uses, is to synthetically generate those events. So I want to do some other stuff. There is, actually, I think Palantir, where it is, now I'm kind of leaving it again, but Palantir's article talked about, where are they? The auto runs example. So they even give a sample of doing just this. And their example says, hey, I'm going to run auto runs on a machine in a scheduled task and actually create Windows event log entries that is what the computer's auto runs is. So it uses the auto runs exe to generate data, stick it into an event, and then collect that event. So that's a good example of what they did. And you kind of use what they have to do what you want from there. So again, community is awesome. And I realize the reason I also say the community is awesome is because yesterday I'm sitting here going, community is super, super awesome, because I'm sitting here, hey, let me show you this 45-line code that will let me alert my domain admins when I'm having to do. And I got Fred who goes, oh, well, I got a module that I wrote for that. And I can do this in effectively one line. Oh my gosh. So if you want to, there you go, Fred Wyman, install module called subscriber, and you can do exactly that line that I had in just that. And it is install event subscription, give it the name of the subscription, the actual code that you actually want to run with that. And inside of that will give you all the objects. So that name value queries, it happens for you because Fred already wrote the module for it. I'm like, oh, Fred. If only I'd known. But that's where it goes. The point being, in this example, he's using, actually, you know what? I think I can do this. Because I think I put it here. Let's see if I can give a sample of it. Git command, module subscriber. I think I put it on this computer. Move the mouse. Yep, it's here. So now we're going to use help. Again, PowerShell is your friend. Then subscriber examples. So that's where I got it from. So this example, but what I was running, event subscriber, is that we can come here and go, like, wait, Fred, I want custom events. I don't want just this particular one event ID. One goes, well, it's also here. What I'm looking for is, so XML is your friend. I can generate that XML query, and anything that XML query will do will give me the parts I'm looking for. So I could give me all the events that are anything. And so all of the other stuff I could potentially get to, I could just pass in the XML itself. So the XML filter, if I had it back in this machine, I can do the same thing, right? So subscriber name and such. But that's going to be the gist of my talk, in that the community is super, super awesome. And certainly engage with the community. And I say that, back to here. Oh, we're going to go all the way to the front. No. Yeah, community is super, super awesome. And if you talk to people and you engage with the community, you can find out that, the 12 and a half hours that you did work, and you find out, oh, I wrote that, and here it is. And so it's fun. Thank you, and don't forget to fill out your survey. And if you have any other questions, I know there's a bunch of people who do a bunch of event log collection, and the community is there. The community is awesome, and they engage with each other. And thanks so much.